Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this video, we are going to understand how to send mail using Node Mailer library. In many applications, you would like to send mail when the user logged in, order a product, or make any payments. In that situation, you would like to send an email to the user. You can use a Node Mailer to do that. So let's understand how to send mail using Node Mailer with Node.js. So I'm going to first simply set up the backend application and install a library called Node Mailer. So let's first set up the backend application. I'm going to create a folder here, mailer, and open my terminal. Inside this terminal, I'm going to first enter into this mailer directory and initialize this folder with npm package. So I'm going to say npm init-y. So this will just initialize this folder, and I'm going to have package.json file inside it. Just out of that, I'm going to install a few libraries inside this project. So I'm going to say npm I for install express. I'm using express to create a backend server. And then I'm going to say nodemon to restart the server every time we make changes in the server file. So once we have these packages inside this project, inside these node modules, let's create a new file here with the name server.js. And just back to the package.json, get rid of this test command and create here a start command. And here you have to say server.js. And whenever you make changes inside the server.js file, you have to restart the server. So I'm using here nodemon library every time we make changes in this server file. Let me save this file back to the server. Right here, I'm going to first set up the express application. So what you have to do is you have to say here constant express is equal to, and we're going to require the express. Then I'm going to say constant app is equal to express. We create a simple instance of the express application. And then we're simply going to say here app.listen and listen to the port. Now right now I don't have any port, so let's specify here 5000, the port name, and then I'm going to specify here a callback function. Inside this callback, we're simply going to say console.log and say server is started. So this will create a simple backend. Save this, open the terminal, and here I'm going to say npm start. We are going to execute this start command. When I press enter, this is going to start the Node.js backend server. That's simple, right? Just out of that, let me just close this file because we are not using it. Now, just out of that, let me just create this port variable right up here. So we're going to say constant port equal to, and then I'm going to specify here 5000. And then we specify this port variable right here. Now, just out of that, if you have the environment variable inside your application, then you can specify that environment variable here. So you can simply specify here process.env and then your variable name. And if you don't have that, then back to your default value. You can also say here app.use and specify the express to use the JSON format. And just out of that, you can create different routes for your application. So here we're simply going to say here app.use, and we are going to create a routes file inside a dedicated folder. So instead of creating a route inside this file, let's create a new folder here. And inside that, we have a file called route.js. And then we call this file inside the server. So at the top, right up here, we say constant app route is equal to require. And inside a single quote, we specify specify routes route.js. Make sure you specify extension with the file name. Just out of that, you call this app route inside this app.use. But before that, I'm going to specify the endpoint. So we specify here /API, and then we specify here comma and say app route like this. We're going to call this variable right here. So whenever we need to access the route of the application, we need to start the application routes with the API endpoint. Just out of that, once we have this route file, let's back to that file and create different routes inside this application. So to create a route, we're simply going to say constant router. We need router to create routes. So we say here require, and we first require the express, and from the express, you call a router function and you specify that to this variable. And just out of that, right down here, so we're simply going to say here router.post. We are going to first create the post HTTP request. So we call here router.post, then specify the endpoint. So we specify here /user/, then specify here sign up. Now that's upon you. You can specify your own endpoint here. Just for that, as a second argument, you specify your controller with request and response parameter, something like this. But instead of having your controller inside this route file, let's create a new folder and create the controller inside that folder. So inside this mailer, inside this project, we create a new folder called controller. We create a new file with the name app controller.js. And inside this, we create a controller for these routes. So right down here, we create a controller for the sign up. So we say here constant is equal to, and as you know, inside a controller, we need to call a parameter called request and response. And from the sign up, I'm simply going to return a response with JSON. So we say here response.status 201.json. And I'm going to say sign up successfully. Just out that right down here, you have to export this function. So you have to say module.exports is equal to, and from this object, I'm going to say sign up. So now you can access this controller right inside your route file. So save this back to your route file, and at the top here you can say constant sign up is equal to, and you call double dot / specify controller app controller.js. And as you know, sign up is not a default export from this file, so we call that inside an object. Call this sign up right here instead of this function. So when you call this endpoint, it's going to call this controller. Let's suppose that you have one more route. So if I say here router.post and create one more endpoint for products. So let's suppose if I have product with get bill endpoint, and if I create here a controller right inside this file, if I say constant get bill is equal to request and response, and then return a response. So copy this, specify that here, and say get bill successfully. Save this file back to the route, then copy this get bill, import that right here, and then specify that to this endpoint. And now just for that, make sure you export this get bill from this controller, just like this. And now just for that, make sure you export this router. So specify here module.export is equal to router. So you're simply going to export this router and get that router inside the server file right here and specify that to this middleware. And now if you make a post request to these endpoints, then you will get the response back from these controllers. To make a request, I'm using here Thunder Client extension. I'm going to open this Thunder Client. To make a post request, I'm going to click on this new request, and then I'm going to specify my server address. So I'm going to say here http localhost :5000 / API, and inside that API, as you know, we have a user sign up. Copy that and specify that right here. And don't forget to get rid of this S right from this HTTP, because this is not a secure endpoint. Just out of that, select the post HTTP request and then click on the send button. When you click on send, you can see you will get a result from your server. Sign up successfully. And if you do the same for this product endpoint, so if you copy this endpoint and then specify that right here and make a post request, you will get bill successfully. So you'll get the response from these controllers. Now what I can do is I can just copy this endpoint back to the server, and here we can simply say, I'm going to specify the backtick operator and say here server is running on, and I'm going to specify here the address, and I'm going to get rid of this 5000 and then specify here my port name. So we specify here port. So when I save the changes, I'm going to have my server address inside my console. So I can just copy this URL and specify that right inside this address. Now let me show you how to send email using Node Mailer. So I'm going to first stop the development server. To send mail using your Node application, you have to install a library called Node Mailer. You have to back to the browser and open a website called nodemailer.com. And from here, you can find more about this Node Mailer library. Node Mailer is a module for Node application to allow easy to click email sending. To install Node Mailer, you have to copy this command and then specify that inside this terminal. Once you install this node mailer, you can just restart your server, close this terminal, and just back to your app controller. Now, inside this controller, from both these endpoints, you can send mail. You have to first import node mailer. So I'm going to say here constant node mailer is equal to, and say here require, and require node mailer. Now once you have the node mailer, you need to create a node mailer transporter. If you scroll down, you have a transporter to make an email using SMTP server. You have to call a node mailer dot create transporter. Now this is going to create a reusable transporter object using the default SMTP transport. Now before we move to the real email account, let's set up all this code using this testing account. So what you have to do is you have to generate SMTP service account from the ethereal email. You have to copy this command and specify that inside this signup right here. Now because we have here await, we need to call here async. We need to make this controller completely asynchronous. So if you don't have any real mail account, then you can use this statement. Just for now, for testing, we are using this testing account. Just for that, we're going to copy this code and then specify that right down here. Now this statement is going to create a reusable transporter object using the default SMTP transport. And using this transport object, you can send a mail. Now that's upon you. You can specify any name to this transporter. Inside this node mailer dot create transport, we have to specify a configuration object. Inside this object, you're going to have the host, the port name, then we have the secure property and the user authentication. Here, you have to specify the username and the user password. Because we are using the testing account, we just generated the random username and password using this create test account and then specify that right inside this auth. When we add the real Gmail account inside this app, then we replace this account credentials with the real account. Just for now, I'm going to specify everything as it is. Copy this statement. This is going to send a mail with the defined transport object. So I'm going to copy that and then specify that right here. But what I'm going to do is, instead of transport.sendMail, I'm going to cut this object right from here, get rid of the statement, and here I'm going to say let message is equal to, and then specify this object. And here we specify all the details of the email. So we first specify from where we're going to send the mail, then we specify to, where we want to send this mail, then we specify the subject, the text, what we want inside the mail, and the HTML. Just out of that, I'm going to copy this transporter, specify that right here, and then I'm going to call here dot send mail. And we're going to send a mail using this transporter. And then here, you have to specify your mail object. So you call here message, something like this. If this is a successful promise, then we're going to get this response inside this then. So we call here then, something like this. And inside this then, I'm going to say return response dot status 201 dot JSON. And inside this JSON, I'm going to return a message. You should receive an email. And then if there is a problem, if we get an error, we catch that error inside this function and say return response dot status 500, and then I'm going to say here JSON, and this is an error, so we call this error object, and I'm going to get rid of this statement. So we comment this statement, save the changes, back to the new request, and here I'm going to specify this user sign up route. So we specify here user sign up like this, and when I click on the send button, oops, I think I misspelled something. Yeah, right here it's node mailer. I just misspelled this. Save the changes, and when I make a post request, you can see I'm going to get here a message called you should receive an email. But where you can see this email, to preview your email, you can just access an object from this response right from here. If I call here info, and if I grab this, and if I say here message, and after this message, if I specify here info dot message ID, then we can get the message ID inside this info property. And if I want to get a preview, then I can call here a property called preview. And if you want to see the preview of your mail, then you can simply call here nodemailer dot get test message URL and pass info object. Now let me save the changes, back to the request, and make a post request again. When we make a post request, you should receive an email. This is the info, this is the ID of your mail. And when you click and open this URL, and if you open this URL, you can see you're going to have your email. This is your subject, then you have your time, the message ID, and your email text. Now, if you want to make changes in it, then you can do that as well. So let's suppose if I get rid of this hello world, and if I make successfully register with us, if I send this, and then I'm going to copy this, and we're going to do the same for this HTML as well. Back to the request and click on the send button. This is going to make a request and you'll get the URL here. Just get that URL and specify that here. You can see you're going to have your response. Successfully register with us. So you can send any email from this body. You have to just specify the subject, your text, and using this transporter, you can make an email. Now, once you understand how to make a mail using the testing account, let me show you how you can use the real Gmail account to send mail to the user. So I'm going to back to the second endpoint of this controller. From this get bills, we are going to send a mail using real Gmail account. So I'm going to add here a command and say send mail from real Gmail account. And this first endpoint is for send mail from testing account. Right inside this get bill, right down here, I'm going to say let config is equal to, and I'm going to create this configuration object, this one. So I'm going to just specify here first service, which is Gmail, and then you have to specify the auth property. Inside this auth, you're going to have the user and the user password. And then right down here, you call let transporter is equal to nodemailer dot create transport, and then you specify this configuration option here, this one. And just after that, you have to specify your email right inside this user property, and then specify password of your email right inside this password property. Now you don't have to specify your email password right inside this pass property. What you have to do is you have to open your Google account and create a simple app and then specify that password right here. So what I'm simply going to do is, let me first create a file called env.js. Now that's upon you, you can create .env file inside the server file as well. But I'm just going to create here env.js file, and right here, I'm going to say export an object. And right from here, I'm going to say module.exports, and we are going to export an object. Inside this object, we are going to have two variables. First is email of the user, and second is the password. And we're going to specify this email and password right here. So at the top, right up here, I'm going to say constant. In the object, we call email and password is equal to, and then we specify here require, and inside this require, we get /env.js, and we specify this email right here, and password goes here, back to the env.js, and here we specify the email and password. Now I'm using my email right here, so I'm going to specify here my email, and then I'm going to specify password of this email. So to get your password, just search for my account and click on Google account, the first link. This will open all the details of your email. Just click on security, and from the security, scroll down, and when you scroll down, here you can see you have here sign in into Google, and right from here, you have to enable two-step verification. Once you enable it, you can find the app password. Click on app password, specify your real Gmail account password here. Once you successfully sign in, you will have the window something like this. Here you have your app passwords. App password lets you sign in your Google account from apps on device that don't support two-factor authentication. So you have to create here the app password. I already have one app password right here. You can notice. Let's create one more. let me select mail here right from this select app, and then select the device. I'm using Windows computer, so I'm going to say here Windows computer, and I'm going to click on this generate button. When I click on this generate, this is going to generate a new password. You can notice here. Just copy this password and close this tab. Back to your env.js and specify that password here. Save this file back to the app controller. As you know, we are accessing this password right from this .env, and then specify that to this authentication. So once we have the email and the password, now we can send a mail using this Gmail account. Keep in mind, when you download this project, you have to create this .env file and specify your own email and password. Instead of using the same technique to create an email, I'm using MailGen library to generate a mail. So I'm going to open my terminal, stop the development server, and I'm going to install a library called npm i mailgen. Using MailGen, we can specify the template to the email. Let me just start the development server. Once you have the MailGen at the top, right up here, I'm going to say constant MailGen is equal to require, and here we call the MailGen library. Inside this get bill, right down here, once we initialize this transporter, right down here, I'm going to say let mail generator is equal to, and create a new MailGen instance. Inside an object, we need to first specify the theme property, which is default. Then we need to specify the product, which is going to be the name. Let me just add here a link of MailGen. Just after that, let's use this mail generator. Just after that, right down here, let's generate the email. So we say here let response is equal to, in the object, we first specify the body of the mail. So we call here colon body. We specify the name of the user. Then we specify the intro. You get all these properties from the MailGen object. So you specify here intro. Then I'm going to specify here your bill as arrived. Then we specify the table. We create a table inside a mail, and we specify data to it. Inside an array, we specify the item, which is going to be node mailer stack book. Then we specify the description of it. So we specify here description, which is going to be a MERN, a backend, stack, application. And then we specify here price. Price is going to be $10. Now just for that, we need to wrap this inside an object, something like this. If you want, you can add one more item inside this array as well. That's upon you. You just have to copy this object and add one more item. I'm going to leave everything as it is. And just out of that, just out of this table, you can add the outro. And here you specify looking forward to do more business. Now, once we have the body of the mail, you have to specify this response to the mail generator. So we have to specify here let mail is equal to mail generator dot generate, and you have to specify this response right here, this one. So we call this mail generator, and then call generate method of it, and call this response object. So this will generate a mail inside this mail variable. And after that, right down here, you can simply specify let message is equal to, and here you specify from, and you specify your own email here. Just copy this and then specify that here. Then specify here to, where you want to send your email. We're going to get the email from the user. So at the top, let me just minimize this. I'm going to get the email from the user. So I'm going to say here constant. In the object, we say user email, and we get that from request.body. So when we make a post request, we need to specify where we want to send this mail. So we specify that user email right inside this variable, and we call this user email right here. Just out of that, we specify the subject. Subject is going to be place order, and then we specify the HTML, which is going to be this mail variable, this one. And just out of that, right down here, you have to call your transporter, this object dot send mail, And here you have to specify this message, then call then, and from then I'm just going to simply return response dot status 201, and then say here dot json, and inside the json I'm going to send a message. You should receive an email. I don't have to send any email URL or something like that. Just after that, here I'm going to specify catch. If there is an error, then catch that and return response dot status 500 dot json, and inside it we return error. Get rid of this statement. So I'm going to comment this back to the new request, and here you have to specify this route product get bill. You specify that right here. This is a type of post request, and you also need to specify the user email. As you know, if you scroll up, then you will notice here you have this user email property. You have to pass this value when you make a post request. So what we are going to do is we select the body, and in the double quote we specify this user email, something like this, and then right here we need to specify the user email here. Now instead of specifying the real email here, you can just get your email in the random email as well. So what you have to do is you have to open the tempmail.org and copy this random mail. Just copy it. This is a temporary email address, so you can get your email right inside this inbox. So just copy this email, specify that here, and when you click on this send button, oops, something is missing right here. Yeah, I don't have name, so let me specify value here, daily tuition. Save the changes. Let me click on the send button and make a post request. I'm going to get the status 201, and I'm going to have here a message call you should receive an email. If I back to my temp mail, then you will notice here we have here an email from the sender, dailytuitiontutorials.gmail.com. If I open it, I'm going to have my mail here. This is my name. Then you will have this text and your table. And if you back to your Gmail, and if you click on send, then you will notice you have here a send mail. So we are sending this email from this real Gmail account to this temporary mail account. Now here I'm using the temporary email. You can replace this value with your friend's email and make a request. Your friend should receive an email from you with this email body. So I hope you understand how to make mail using Node Mailer using Node.js. You can download this code from the link provided in the description. If you find anything useful, make sure to press the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe for more latest videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next one.